So I hand over to you to introduce Johnny.
And thank you so much, John. And that's a fantastic introduction, because I, in fact, first met Johnny when I was a candidate alongside him in the Southwest, out campaigning in Plymouth. And I can absolutely attest to how well loved he is in his patch as an extremely active MP. And I was so delighted, Johnny, that you did become the Minister for Veteran Affairs, and particularly as this is such your area of expertise. And just to remind members on the call that, of course, before Johnny was elected, he served in the armed forces, in particular served in Afghanistan on 3 tours. And I also wanted to highlight the excellent work he did setting up the APPG on the Armed Forces Covenant. And it's such a great example of a minister now being in charge of exactly that brief, where he was lobbying from the backbenches to bring in the covenant, and is now the minister helping bring that through the Commons. And John, it'd be great to hear a bit more about that. And just on a personal note, obviously this week we've been bringing in the desecration of the War Memorials Bill. I have MOD Stafford in my patch, and that was the very first piece of legislation that I co-sponsored as a new MP. So what fantastic timing to have the minister here with us this week, as there's so much happening in the defence space, particularly with the Prime Minister's speech on the integrated review. So Johnny, we're delighted to have you, and we look forward to hearing on the excellent progress you've made on veteran affairs, and nice to have you with us.
Theo, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me this evening. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, I mean, fundraising in these events have taken on a new slant, really, ever since COVID came in. Yeah, you know, I think it's really important that we continue to do them. I think it's been an incredibly difficult time, obviously, for the country, but also in terms of maintaining organisations like your own. So I was delighted, particularly, to come and speak with you this evening. I thought what I would do is firstly cover the veterans piece, and then talk a little bit about the IR, and then really go to questions. So veterans affairs. Look, I think as everybody knows, I served for a while in the military, and I left and became a member of Parliament to try and address veterans care in the UK and the government's attitude towards it. I think you know, for all that's happened over the years, and you know, I think people fall in love and then slightly out of love and back in love again with the Conservative Party as we go through our various iterations. I will always be profoundly grateful to the Conservative Party for being the first major party to take this stuff seriously. When I left Afghanistan, it was you know, the veterans care was just appalling, and it was okay for people like me who, you know, didn't really do much and survived, but for the families and those who were seriously injured, it was an appalling experience. It's been a long road to try and change that, through knocking on doors in Plymouth and getting elected, which was great fun, and just made me fall in love with Plymouth all over again, to the fights from the backbenches, which was pretty brutal at times and pretty lonely, through to now being a minister, where you could argue it's even more brutal and even more lonely, in trying to get this agenda through and into the political bandwidth, if you like, both of the government but of the nation as well, so that we are following through on some of our pretty key promises towards our veteran community. Yeah, when you know, when Boris became Prime Minister, when Boris and Jeremy got down to the last two, essentially my plan was to get them both to sign up to something called a Veterans Pledge. And you'll know as well as I do that when it gets to that stage, if you can catch them at the right time, they'll basically sign up to anything. So I thought, now is my moment. And I got them both to sign the Veterans Pledge in the Sun newspaper. So there was no backtracking. And the Veterans Pledge was very clear. We would introduce legislation to end this rather macabre spectacle of soldiers being investigated 40, 50 years after they've served in the military for things that probably didn't happen. We would also legislate for the Armed Forces Covenant and actually bring it into law so that you could not be discriminated against because of your service. And we would set up something called the Office of Veterans Affairs. So we were the only sort of peer Five Eyes nation. What that means is, like, when you think about our militaries, we're kind of on a par with you know, the US, UK, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, in terms of capability, not in terms of size, obviously, but in terms of capability. But we were the only ones without a veterans office. And I wanted to correct that. So obviously when Boris won, he asked me to do it, which was great. And it's been an interesting experience ever since. I found it very interesting in the transition from backbencher to being a minister. It is, I think, you know, for all the challenges we've had, we've made real progress over the last 18 months. It's very difficult to set up a new organization within government. It's very difficult to set it up as a junior minister without, you know, without the kind of things that come with being a bit more senior, people to help you and comms teams and things like that. But, you know, so you have to get your elbows out to get anything done. But we have delivered, you know, whether it's finally getting data on awful things like veteran suicide, to delivering a rail card, to national insurance holidays to employers, to get people jobs, to the guaranteed interview scheme if you're going to the civil service. You know, we've delivered in spades, and I think slowly but surely and incrementally and irreversibly, we are changing what it means to be a veteran in the UK in the 2020s, which I'm enormously proud of the team for the work they've done. Only last, you know, one of the things we promised was there's a lot of veterans care in this country, but understanding where it is and how to access it is very difficult. And one thing I promised was, you know, that I would introduce a single front door and care pathway through the NHS care provisions for our veterans. And we launched Operation Courage last week, which will do exactly that. And provides a clear care pathway for our veterans. So, look, we are making progress. Where do we go from here? Very good question. I think, look, I will not stop campaigning really until we have a proper sort of Office of Veterans Affairs, a veterans minister who sits in cabinet and is taken as seriously as all the other government departments. We need to make sure that we are empowered correctly in order to bring together all the functions of government, whether it's healthcare, whether it's housing, whether it's benefits, whether it's mental health, whether it's opportunities in the jobs market. All these things need to be brought together, so that instead of us sort of saying all the time we're putting this amount of money into veterans care or this amount of money into something else, we can actually answer the fundamental question of what it feels like to be a veteran. What's it like to try and access those services? And once we change that, because a lot of the services are there, and there's some brilliant people in this country doing amazing things for veterans, right? It's quite a swift process. It doesn't require a lot of money. It just requires coordination, leadership, a bit of dynamism, and we can get it over the line. And I'm hopeful by the next election, we'll have really achieved things that we can be proud of. And we are the first party to do it, to go from saying really nice things about our veterans and looking really somber on Remembrance Day to actually doing things and voting things through in Parliament. And I'll be honest, I have been surprised how difficult that has been. And that's why I will always be grateful to the Conservative Party for giving me the opportunity to bring in things like the Overseas Operations Bill. No other party would do this. You know, it receives opposition because essentially the human rights lobby is an industry, a self-licking lollipop, and they don't want to go out of business. And so the campaign against me has been pretty virulent at times. But, you know, we will get this bill through, and it will mean that there is increased protections for those who serve. Clearly, but there is no hiding place for those who break the law. But this Prime Minister is very, very clear that the days of endlessly chasing veterans and making money out of legal aid are over. And we will bring that in, and that'll be something to be proud of. So, look, veterans, we're on a journey. and we're in a pretty good space, but we've got more to do. You know, it's all good stuff. When it comes to the integrated review, look, I think the integrated review is a really good opportunity. I mean, much like Theo, I was, you know, disappointed around the. I don't know actually if she was disappointed, but I expect she was around. The cut to overseas aid. Okay, I have a lot of sympathy for this view. You know, charity starts at home, particularly in a seriously deprived constituency like Plymouth. But it all, you know, we've always stovepiped what we've tried to do overseas and kind of had the military and the ODA and the Foreign Office and so on. And what the IR is trying to do for the first time is to bring it all together so that we're judged really by our effect and our impact. And I think what the Prime Minister's done there is very clever and long overdue. It talks about, you know, harnessing the sort of group power, if you like, of our ability to, yes, deploy military forces and go on exercise, but also employ our aid budgets and our trade negotiations and our marketing powers to really achieve things for this country on the international stage. Obviously, I would say this, but the most exciting bit comes out on Monday when there's a defence white paper, and that will reshape really what the military looks like, you know, for the decade to come. I'm afraid I am relentlessly trying to modernise the military, and I think it's a very good thing. I think it's a very good piece of work. I think it represents really good opportunities for our people who are joining up to the military. Are there difficult decisions in there? Yes. But throughout our history, people have had to make decisions as to how, when warfare changes, you change the way you behave in order to make sure you keep winning at warfare. So, you know, there will be a bit of that in there, but I hope that people will understand and will see the sort of bright vision for what it is. This government, this Conservative government, will be, you know, has increased defence spending by £24 billion over this Parliament. That is a pretty extraordinary uplift. And with that, I'm afraid, comes an inherent responsibility to modernise. You can't just chuck that over at legacy platforms and just get your numbers up and hope for the best. You have to adapt. You have to deal with the challenges as you see them and as they're presented, and do everything around the threat. Like, what is the threat to this country? And then define your military according to that. So look, I think there's going to be some great stuff in there. I think it's you know, another opportunity to be quite proud of what's going on. I think we've had a particularly difficult 18 months, obviously, as a country. And then when a country goes through a situation like this, I think everybody's got an opinion, and everyone's opinion will be different. And therefore, you know, and particularly when the impact on our people, for example, not going to funerals and things like that is so acute, people are going to feel very, very passionately about it. And things will get from time to time. But I think it's clear, and people are beginning to see now that, you know, particularly the vaccine is a huge success for this government and for this country. It has had a real world impact on people who live in places like Plymouth. And if we focus on that and continue to roll it out and continue to, you know, abide by the regulations, we will come out of this. And then, of course, there will be an inquiry, and of course there will have been things we could have done better, but I think, you know, the Prime Minister is probably big enough and ugly enough to have that honest conversation with the British people, and that's why people like him and why people vote for him and why we're 9 points ahead in the polls tonight, despite us having been in power for quite a while and have gone through a national emergency. So you know, I think we're in a we're coming to the end of a very difficult period in our history. Obviously, we're going into local elections, which are really important, particularly in places like Plymouth. You know, there's some fantastic volunteers going out day after day, banging on doors now, and the reception in Plymouth certainly is pretty good. So, look, that's where we are in terms of a kind of state of the nation, if you like, as to where we are. But what I'm more than happy to do is sort of take questions on any of that, on any of the points that have been raised, or indeed anything else, and answer any queries or challenges you may have, particularly challenges to anything I've said. Over to you.
Melissa? Thank you, Johnny. Briefly. Where's Melissa?
Yes.
Are you on?
Carl
Melissa,
is
you
doing
choosing the questioners. That's down to you, my dear.
yes, Carl Hunter is doing the Q&A. Are you ready, Carl?
Right.
Yes, absolutely. Evening, Melissa and Baroness. Lovely to see you all. Johnny, a great pleasure to see you tonight. And what a treat and what a journey you've been on. I think it's absolutely remarkable, frankly. And you should hold yourself with some. You should comport yourself with great pride.